In this screencast, we're going to take a look at implicit intents in Android, and in particular, we're going to look at how we can launch an activity defined external to our current application via an implicit intent. And then secondly, we're going to look at it from the other direction as well, how we can use intent filters to make our activity available to be launched by other activities using implicit intents. Let's look at implicit intents from the launching side. So let's assume we're going to write an application and we want that application to launch other applications or other application components by using these implicit intents. So let's start out by creating a new Android project, and I will call this my Android intent launch demo. Let's go Google 2.2. We'll use maps here, so we need that. All right. So let's go in and start with our layout, and let's create a simple well, we've already got a main layout, so let's go in here and drag some buttons, and we'll use those buttons as launch buttons. So we'll start with this one, and let's do the view image use case first. So that's button 1, and let's set the text on it. Alright, so that's my view, and let's go to the code and hook up a handler. And how do I get my handle to that button? I do a find view by ID, right? And then how do I add my handler on there? Anybody? How do I hit? I want to handle a button click, so I'm going to call the what method? Set on-click listener, right? And then we're going to do a new, and then the actual interface is defined on the view class itself. Alright, so this is where we're going to be when that button gets clicked, and we want to launch an intent. And one of the things I did a priori here, just to save time, is I went and dragged a image file onto the SD card of my emulator device. And so we can see that if you go to the DDMS perspective here in Eclipse, and if we go down to the file, oops, Eclipse has lost its connection, so we need to restart the emulator. And that's going to take a minute. So let me just go back to the code, and after the emulator's happy again, we'll I thought I'd save time by starting it before class, and it looks like it lost it. Well, in the meantime, let's write the code. So I'm going to create a new intent, and this is going to be an implicit intent. So let's just create a shell of an object here, and what I want to do is view a picture, and I want to use whatever component this device has for viewing a picture that's on my file system. And we know already that this thing has a camera that comes preloaded on the emulator, and we know that it supports that. So let's go ahead and set the action So to set the action, I'm going to call a method called setAction. And now the action that I want to use here is predefined, and it's if we want to reference it, we can actually, this is no wonder it wasn't figuring it out for me. Okay, so this is already defined in the Android packages, and this is the standard action for any time you want to use the verb view something. Okay, so if I want to view a web page, or view an address, or view a contact, or view any piece of data, this is the action. And you'll find a link, you'll find a page out there in the Android documentation that lists out all these standard verbs that you can use when you create implicit intent. So I'm going to use the view, and now what I want to do is specify where that file is. So I want to give the data piece. So let me just start my emulator again. Oops, I didn't want to do that. So I put it out on the SD card, and I can access my SD card using, so these are the same Java I/O APIs that you're already familiar with. And the path here is going to be like this. And I named the file scenery.jpg. So I've preloaded that out there, and we'll confirm that once my emulator boots up. And I'm going to take that piece of data, and I'm going to set on my intent the data and a MIME type. So I'm going to create a URI, and then the type here, is a string, and the MIME type for images starts with image / and then it's JPEG, PNG, or whatever. Or you could just go like this and basically say, any certain viewers might only view certain files. So if I put this in here, I'm just looking for a generic image viewing component. And then this is basically all I need. I want to view it, and this is the data I want to view. What do I do now? I've got my implicit intent. How do I act upon it? Start activity, exactly. And in this case, I'm just looking to display something, so I'm not really interested in a result. So we'll just call start activity. And let's just go over to our DDMS and confirm. So now I am indeed up there. So let's go to the files. And so your SD card gets mounted under the, so we're at the root file system here. So your SD card is going to be mounted under MNT mount. So if we go under here, and sure enough, you'll see that I've got this JPEG on there. And if you're wondering how I got that there, you'll notice up here in the upper right, there's two little icons. The one on the left is a little floppy disk with an arrow pointing to the left, and the one on the right is a little cell phone icon with an arrow pointing to the right. This one on the right, the one of the cell phone, pushes data onto the device from your local file system. So if you've got any kind of data, images, database, any kind of assets that you wanted to move out to the SD card on that device, you can simply click that, and it will prompt you what file do you want to load. So this is how I got it out there. On the other hand, if you're ever in a situation where you wanted to pull data off your device and then look at that data or manipulate it on your local PC, then you could use this button on the left. Okay? For example,
In a little bit, we'll talk about SQLite. So one of the things SQLite does is it stores your relational database content in a file. And if you download that file from your device, there's a bunch of SQLite editor type files out there that you can download and actually look at the database, look at its schema, manipulate it, insert records, delete records, or whatever, and then you can actually push it back on the device. So this is kind of convenient stuff to know about when you're developing. You can easily move data onto your device's file system or back out if you want to manipulate that data in your dev environment. All right, so we've confirmed it's there, and I think we're all set. So if we run this, it should go ahead and when we click the button, it should take that intent, create it, and then find a component out there on my emulator that can display an image. So let's watch what it does. So I'm going to run this as an Android application, and it should connect to my emulator here. This is an old version. All right, and there it is. I got my button, and so if I click my button, there's my image, and this is the actual camera application that's doing that. And how do I get back? I hit the back button, right? If I hit the back button, I'm right back into my application. Okay? So without really writing any image display code, I'm just taking advantage of another application's capability to display an image. And of course, I get all the other goodies too. So I can share that image. Okay, so this I get for free because this is what the camera app already implements. Okay, or I could even set that image as my default wallpaper and all that good stuff. All right, so that's one example. Let's do one more. Let's add another button to our layout, and let's just show how we can start up the map app and have it display a particular address. Okay, so all we're going to do is give it a geo URL, set the intent to view, and then just see what it does. So let's make this button label a little bit more understandable. Okay, so I got a view map button, and then let's go to our Java code and hook that one up. So we'll find the view ID, and it's r.id, and I must not have saved it. Alright, so there's got my button, and now we'll add the handler. And so now what we want to do is create an intent. And we're just going to feed it different data. We're going to essentially do the same thing we did before. So we'll just create a geo URI, and these also are listed. So all these different types of URIs that are kind of predefined that Android by default has components that understand, those are all given in a chart out there on the Android.com developer site as well. And there's tons of different things you can use, URIs, different UI patterns that are out there. So this is the one for running the map application. So what we're going to do is tell it to look up an address, and I'll just give it the White House here to make it interesting. So I'm URL encoding this, so wherever there's a space, I'm just putting a plus sign. Okay, so that's a geo URL that just says, I'm interested in this location. And now we can do the same thing we did before.
Actually, I can also feed this to a constructor, so let's do it that way. So assuming we have this, let's go ahead and create this. So that string that I used, or that longhand that I used above, I can also access it via a constant defined on the intent class. Oh, I actually have to put this into a form of a URI, so I gotta say alright, and then I can take that URI and pass it here, and then finally, so now I've got my URI, and I want to view that URI, and I can start an activity and remember my semicolon. Okay, so let's try this one. View the map. Bingo. Okay. And if I back out of here, I'm right back to where I was. Okay, so it's quite straightforward in terms of invoking other components that are already defined out there by just creating these implicit intents and knowing, what are the verbs, what are the URL patterns that they, in MIME types that they support, and running them. So you can go through the documentation and you can find, all kinds of goodies, all kinds of existing application functionality that just by creating an implicit intent you can integrate into your own applications. But now let's take a look at this from the other side. So let's look at this in the reverse, and let's say we want other people to be able to invoke our application components from their apps. So we're going to look at the flip side of this. And so what I want to do now is, we just looked at the view image and we saw that the camera has a component that does that. So what I want to do is write my own little simple image viewer app and kind of intercept that behavior. So when people go to view images and they have my app installed, my app comes up and is an option for them to use. So let's take a look at how we can accomplish that. So I'm going to leave this launcher app as is. So it's just going to go off and fire that action view with a file URL. And what I want to show you is how I can write the image viewer that actually registers the right intent filter when I install it, so that it comes up in that menu that lets me say, what, do you want to use a camera app for this, or do you want to use this custom app that was installed? So let's create a new project, and we'll call this one our Android intent target demo, because we want to write an app that becomes the target of intents that other apps are firing. And we will go with Google 2.2 level 8. And this app will be, I can't remember what I did in the other one, intent target demo. Okay, so let's go and create a layout first of all. And we'll just go ahead and use this existing one. And what we want to do is drag an image view on there. And let's tweak these a little bit. We'll say and we should center that maybe. And let's also center this guy here. So by default, it's just taking the only image, the only drawable that we have here. There we go. Alright, so there's my layout. So it's just going to put a prompt on the top. This is your image, and it's just going to put it on there. And then I want to, this activity here is going to be fine by default. So this is going to be my launcher activity. If somebody runs this application from the command line, it's going to run there. But I want to create a separate activity and write a separate intent filter for the functionality of when a third party runs my app, I want it to come in on the second one that actually goes and takes the intent data that's being passed to it and pulls the image information out and then tries to display it. So let's create a new activity to serve as the target for that. So we'll call this my target activity, and we'll have this one implement the activity class. And we want it on create here. And we'll go ahead and use the same view. So we'll use that same one. But the difference here is the other activity that we looked at, or that we just had up here, this one is going to be ran when somebody runs our application from the launcher, and it's just going to run with whatever the default image is. But this is the one that's going to run when somebody starts us up with an implicit intent. So the first thing I want to do here is figure out, why did they start me? What did they pass me? And so I'm going to do that by getting the intent data. And the startup intent is available to you simply by calling get intent. So whenever we are targeted by an implicit intent in our onCreate, we can call get intent to get whatever that intent was that triggered us. So that's what we'll do. And once we have that, assuming we got one, so if the intent is not equal to null, then we want to do some things. And one of the things we want to do is get that URI out, because that's the assumption here. When they start us up, they're giving us a URI. So let's say so that gets us the URI. So there's a different message. So I can set bitmap on this thing. And again, this is just something I found in the docs. And then I can do a get content oh, I deleted one line I needed to keep. And this is probably going to be wanting to be try-catched. and I'll just leave that generated one there. All right. So that's the code I need to, given a file URI, how I can grab that file URI and turn it into something that I can actually set on my image view component. There's one more thing I have to do now. So I've written the code for my activity, but now what I need to do is I need to have my activity advertise to the Android platform what its capabilities are. And that's what we use intent filters for. So now I need to go into my manifest, two things. I need to define this new activity that I've introduced, okay? And then I need to set some intent filters on that activity to designate the fact that this thing can display images off the file system. So let's go into the manifest and add that. So I'm going to just kind of repurpose this one, and we'll call this my target activity. And the action here that I care about is view. And then the MIME type okay, so if I tell it, action view and the MIME type, I can view images. Now I'm basically saying this particular activity, knows how to view images. So if I run this, the first time I run it, it's going to install it, and so that's where Android is going to pick up this information out of my manifest. So then if I do that, it's just going to run the launch activity, which just puts up that icon, and then I've told Android about my app, I've installed it. Then the next step will be to go back to my launcher application and see if it indeed now gets involved when we try to view a picture. So let's run this one. Okay, so that's exactly what we expected. And if we exit out of there and go and run our launch demo again, oops. All right, so here's my correct intent filter. For those of you in the back. So I've specified the view action, category default, and the proper MIME type is image / star. So any image type I can deal with. So if we run, let's first run, I've already ran the target, so let's just run the demo app. Alright, so now if I click on the view image, it actually pops up and it asks me, hey, I've got two programs here that will do this. I've got the camera that will view picture, and these labels are the labels that you give on the top of the activity that it shows here. So this was just set to the default. So we could change that to be my custom fancy image viewer, whatever you wanted there. And of course this icon is the icon for the application, so presumably users would recognize that after they've installed it. So if I click this box on here and then I click one of these, from now on when I run, it's not going to pop this window up, it's just going to run with this one. And it put in small letters here in the fine print underneath, you can go and change this later if you want by going to your home settings, applications, manage application. So let's just see if it works. So we'll go intent target demo. Sure enough, now it's running that activity that we just wrote, and it says here's your beautiful image. It's got the image there. So if I back out of here, I'll be back into my launcher app, and if I click it again, notice now it's not going to ask. Because I set that box, it runs it automatically.
And so if I go to my home screen and hit my menu button, go to Settings, go down to Applications, Manage Applications, and then if we go down and find that target app, and you'll see down here it says you have selected to launch this application by default for some action. So if I click that clear button and then we back out of here and run again, if I hit this button again, now it's going to ask because I cleared that out.